Do you want to find a stress-free way to buy your next car? Start at CarMax and shop your way. And if you want to browse with confidence, get pre-qualified online with no impact on your credit score and shop cars within your budget. From luxury cars to family rides, CarMax has options for almost every price range, including more than 25,000 cars priced under $25,000. So hey, want to get started? Just head to CarMax.com for details and get pre-qualified today. Want to drive? CarMax.
Hope you had a great weekend, everybody. Welcome to a new week of Scott Fox After 9. And today, to kick off the week, it's 420. 20th of April is the day that cannabis users sometimes look forward to. Although not as big a deal now as it used to be. You know what I mean? Before legalization, there was a lot of people who treated 420 as the day to protest the fact that we're not allowed to consume something that probably has some medical benefit, definitely helps out with anxiety, at a minimum will help you sleep a little bit better. There was a lot of people that really fought to get cannabis legalized. Now that it is, I'm wondering, is 420 still the same? I think the answer is sort of. I don't think there's a whole ton of people racing out to get high at 420 behind the bleachers, as the legend tells us. But I do think there's more and more people that are trying cannabis. If you're looking for a place to get into the market, or maybe you're already experienced in cannabis and you just want to try something else, I always recommend Spirit Leaf in the Sunrise Center, Kitchener, Ontario. Amir and his staff there are fantastic. I'm there regularly, and they have helped me try some new products that I love. Some new numbers came out regarding cannabis use, and it's interesting because only 42% of companies say they have a policy that specifically prohibits you from being high on the job. Only 42%. I asked this question on my radio show today on Light 92.1 FM. All across Southern Ontario, you can hear Light 92, or just tell your smart speaker to play it, and it will. It's amazing how many people have gone to work high that won't necessarily admit it to the boss or their coworkers, but they're taking in some sort of cannabis while they're on the job or before they even get to the job. Fine. You know, I know there's a lot of people that are very high functioning when they're on the cannabis. I don't really have a problem with that. As long as you're not driving or bothering anybody or doing anything dangerous, I don't really have a problem with it. People that work from home, apparently far more likely to consume cannabis while they're on the job, which is just one more reason I think that people who don't get to work from home dislike those who do even more. Friends, when I came into this pod today, I had every intention of just unloading on the gravy plane. The story that broke after I recorded on Friday that Doug Ford had bought himself a brand new jet for the Premier's office. I thought that was going to dominate the conversation today. I thought it was going to continue on for the days and weeks to come. But apparently somebody in the Premier's office realized a huge firestorm got set off as soon as word leaked that the province had purchased a Challenger jet for the Premier's use. They've canceled the purchase. Well, they haven't canceled it. They've said they're going to sell it as soon as they bought it. 2 days, we technically had it, and now it's on the market again. That because of intense backlash that came from all corners. So on this episode, before I get to Mark Carney and that weird speech that he dropped yesterday online, before I get to that and a little bit of audio from Pierre Poilievre, a little update on trade negotiations with the Americans, you're going to hear from the Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. Before I get to any of that, let's just do a little dive into the Doug Ford gravy plane. And to do that, I'm actually going to start off with Rob Ford. Rob Ford is the late brother of Doug Ford. Rob Ford, a former mayor of Toronto, and Rob was a real for the people kind of guy. He was the kind of politician who fought for the little guy. He was the kind of guy who didn't like to see taxpayer money being wasted. And one of the most famous things that Rob did in office, one of them was he sat down in front of a camera and he laid out all the different perks that he, as a city councilor, gets just for having been elected. Listen to just a little bit of this.
All the free passes for councillors, I call them free perks that are tax-free, which is costing the taxpayers millions of dollars. So let's start off. Free zoo pass. Toronto Zoo VIP pass. The VIP named on this card and his or her family will be granted parking, admission, and rides at the Toronto Zoo without charge. I can bring everybody in my family here to the zoo for free. The average person has to pay $15, $20 to get in, $10 or $15 to park, $5 or $10 a ride. The poor average family is paying $200. Councillors that are getting paid $100,000 get to get in for free. It's absolutely wrong. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Let's get on to some other stuff here. Metro passes. Here's a Metro pass. This is equivalent to $1,300 a year. Again, councillors make $100,000 a year. I take home $1,400 a week net. Why should councillors get a free Metro pass? The TTC's dying for money. We've just increased fares 25 cents. The average person out there, the poor working student or the poor working senior that has to get out there and get on the bus every day, has to pay $3. But we, the councillors, get on the bus for free. This should be eliminated immediately.
That was just a little bit of then City Councilor Doug Ford talking about the ridiculous amount of perks that politicians get. And you know what? For a very long time, it seemed like his brother, Doug Ford, who eventually went on to become Premier of Ontario, was going to follow in Rob's footsteps. He was going to cut out the waste. He was going to eliminate these inequities where regular folks have to pay, but the politicians get it for free, even though the politicians are making a lot of money. Let's go back to Doug Ford shortly after he was first elected Premier, him in the Ontario legislature.
I'm the only premier in history that refuses to use the Premier's plane, the King Air, that costs the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Okay, that was Doug Ford saying, I'm the only Premier who is not using the Premier's plane. So listen, this story broke on Friday. It was Robert Benzies with the Toronto Star that broke the news that the province had purchased a it was a used Challenger Jet 650. They said they needed it to move the Premier around in an efficient way and in a more secure way, and they just needed it. Okay. Well, here's the thing. There's a lot of people who have made hay about the various different comments that have come out of the Premier's office, the various things that have come from media members and more. So I want to sift through it, and I'm going to weigh in on a couple of different points when it comes to this plane, because I think I have found a good balance. The Premier's office says they need a plane. Well, number one, we already have a plane. Now, it's a turboprop, though. It's a King airplane, and as far as I know, it is operated and maintained by the OPP. So we've got this plane that we can use to move the Premier around, but the Premier will sometimes even fly commercial. In fact, across the country, many of the Premiers will often fly commercial. But of course, this is a different situation. The Premier of Ontario is the CEO of a corporation in a way, and it is a multi-billion-dollar corporation. In any other scenario, if you have a multi-billion-dollar corporation, chances are the person at the top or the senior leadership is going to have a private jet. A lot of businesses operate that way. Does that mean, though, that when it's a government scenario, they too should get a private jet? Well, as I look at the geography of Ontario, I don't necessarily think they're that far off in suggesting that they need a plane to move the Premier around in. He is in charge of a big economy. Presumably, he's got a lot of meetings and things to attend. We want the Premier visible in all different parts of the province. I think it makes sense. And when you consider how vast Ontario is, I read a stat once, and I haven't independently verified it, but I'm led to believe it's true. You could fit the entire United Kingdom in Ontario 5 times. That's how much geography is involved here. Now, in fairness, the vast majority of Ontario lives within 20 kilometers of the 401, from Windsor right through to Kingston and up into Ottawa. That's where the vast majority of Ontarians live. You know, it makes sense to me that if the premier is going to be at Queen's Park in Toronto at 10 a.m. for meetings, and he's got to go to Windsor for a news conference, flying makes a lot of sense. And if they had a jet that they could get him from A to B very quickly and back, that makes sense to me. That makes sense. But does he need a Challenger 650 jet? Well, again, maybe he does. The Challenger is a very fast plane. It is able to travel across the Atlantic. If you need it to, it could get him over to Europe. One of the things they said the premier needs this for is travel back and forth between Ontario and America as he tries to work out the trade situation. I mean, I thought he was letting Prime Minister Carney do that, so I don't know why that would be a consideration and why he couldn't fly commercial if he's traveling to the States. But again, I'm going to take their word for it when they say they needed a jet for the premier. Here's the thing. I could be okay with them buying a jet, but there's a couple of things about this purchase that really bother me. Number one, we found out about this because Robert Benzies at the Toronto Star wrote an article exposing this purchase, not because someone from Queen's Park or the premier or one of his staff or one of his ministers came out in front of the camera and said, listen, Ontario, here's the real deal. We need a jet to move the premier around, and we've got an opportunity to buy one that's about 10 years old, but it's less than half of how much the brand new version of that plane would cost. We're going to spend about $29 million and buy this jet for the premier, and it'll be for future premiers. It'll be great for Ontario. We're going to consider this an asset on our balance sheet. Don't get too upset about it. We need this. They didn't do that. Because we found out about it from a leaked report from the Toronto Star, that makes me wonder, when were they going to tell us about this? Were they going to tell us about it? Because frankly, I don't know. I don't know that they would have. How long were we going to have that plane before they announced, oh, yeah, by the way, we bought a plane for the premier? It seems sneaky, you know? I think that's why the vast majority of people that are upset about this are really upset. Number one, because it is a terrible time to be dropping $29 million. Ontario has never had a debt or a deficit like this, and we're spending money on frivolous things. Also, because actually, I shouldn't even say frivolous, because I don't necessarily think this jet was a frivolous idea. I think there's some practical aspects to it, and I think they probably did get a good deal. But again, they weren't upfront with the public about it, and we just listened to the premier lecture people, in particular young people, about money doesn't grow on trees, and you guys need to start being more responsible with your education. Remember when he gutted OSAP and totally handed it to middle-class families? Said, tough, you're either going into the trades or you're going to take on a mountain of debt because Doug Ford says so. He actually said that. Money doesn't grow on trees. And then he spent $30 million on a jet. 29, actually. But you know what? It was going to be well over that when you factor in the operating cost. To fly one of those jets costs thousands of dollars an hour. So you've got the premier here who has lectured everybody about money doesn't grow on trees. We've had a bunch of programs that we Ontarians really like healthcare and education, that seem to be facing some budget challenges. OSAP got cut because apparently we don't have enough money and money doesn't grow on trees. We've still got families that are waiting for funding for autism supports. Can't do that either. But we do have money to buy a jet. And even though all of that is true, I'm still kind of leaning towards maybe we do need that jet. But here's my proposal, because I am a big compromise guy. I really like to find a compromise, and I like to try and cut through some of the noise in the news. This is my proposal. If we actually do need a jet to move around the Premier of Ontario, how about we do this? Right now, we already have a fleet of jets. The jets for the federal government, the ones that move around the prime minister and dignitaries, like when the queen or king is going to come to Canada. It's the Royal Canadian Air Force that operates the fleet that will move these people around. And they've got a big fleet, by the way. They've got big jumbo jets that can carry the prime minister and his staff and the media to overseas junkets. And we've got Challenger jets that can move people from A to B very, very quickly and fairly efficiently as well. If we've already got the Royal Canadian Air Force operating a fleet of jets that is basically for the Prime Minister and senior cabinet ministers and dignitaries, why can't we just agree that premiers also need access to jets? But of course, it doesn't make sense for each province to maintain a fleet of jets. Apparently, the Quebec government has got 3 of these things. How about we look at this as one government? I know it's 3. We've got the federal government, we've got the provincial governments, we've got the municipal governments. Federal, provincial, municipal. How about for provincial and federal, if they need to get around, they just use the Royal Canadian Air Force fleet? And you know what? If Doug Ford wakes up one day in Toronto and says, I got to get to Ottawa pretty quick today, then someone from his team just puts in a call to Trenton, where I believe we keep those jets, and says, hey, we got to move Doug Ford from A to B and back. Send a jet. And they dispatch a jet. It lands in Toronto, picks up the premier, takes him to Ottawa, takes him back, and then the jet goes back to the base. Why can't we do that? Why do we need individual provincial governments trying to maintain their own fleet of jets, which is very, very expensive? I mean, in addition to buying them, you've got to park them, and most airports charge a lot of money for that. You've got to fuel them. And by the way, if you refuel at, say, Pearson Airport, where the premier's jet was going to be kept, the fuel surcharge there is quite high compared to how much fuel might cost if that plane had been kept at, say, Trenton at the Air Force base that we have there, where they get the best price on jet fuel. It seems like there was a compromise here where the premier could have still had access to a jet anytime he wants. But the Royal Canadian Air Force would administer those jets and make sure that he gets where he's going and back safely. Why did we have provinces trying to buy their own jets? Why doesn't this just fall to the armed forces? And that's just one of their responsibilities. We've got this fleet of jets anyway. If we've got to move a premier from one place to the other, we send a jet to do it. And you know what? If it doesn't make sense, if we're talking about a real short flight, or we just truly don't have any flights available, then we can look at charter options. Then we could look at commercial options, maybe different types of aircraft. There's a way to do this without blowing open the budget and wasting a ton of taxpayers' money. I think the premier should have access to jets if he's got to go somewhere. It's a big province, and it doesn't make sense for him to be driving back and forth from Toronto to Ottawa or Toronto to Windsor. I just don't think that makes sense. Flying, that does make sense, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to have our own fleet of jets that we're paying for, that we have to have staffed and pay for the maintenance on, and the expensive jet fuel and the parking and all these other things. Why can't provinces team up? Why can't we have Quebec and Ontario that just share a fleet of jets? Why do they each need to have their own? And by the way, what was going to be the threshold for when the premier flies? I mean, he is in downtown Toronto, basically. That's where Queen's Park is. He lives in the west end of Toronto. If he has to go and do a speech in, say, Kitchener, well, that's an hour drive. But in the air, it's only 20 minutes. Were they seriously going to fly him from Toronto to Kitchener? Would they fly him from Toronto to Hamilton? That's a little less than an hour drive. What was going to be the threshold for how far it had to be before they said, don't drive, fly? There's a lot more questions I've got here. And you know what? We could have had these conversations. It just seems like the province was so sneaky about this. Why did we have to find out from the Toronto Star that 29 million taxpayer dollars got spent on this jet? Why wasn't this an upfront conversation? Hey, the premier got caught. And by the way, he did the right thing. He said, I understand why people are upset. I've heard the backlash. I agree with you that now is not the right time to be spending tax dollars on a brand new jet. So they're going to get rid of it. They're going to sell it off. Good. I hope we don't lose any money on this. But it doesn't solve the problem. Apparently he needs a jet, and I believe that. So if he needs a jet, then why don't we just fix the system? The Royal Canadian Air Force should be in charge of moving Prime Minister, the cabinet, the premiers, wherever they have to go. That shouldn't be just for the exclusive use of the federal government. That's crazy. We've got these jets that cost a lot of money, and we got to fly them. So fly around the premiers. That makes perfect sense to me. I don't know why we wouldn't do that, or at least start having that conversation. Friends, I'm going to move on from this, and it's disappointing because there were so many different jokes I had. I spent the weekend thinking about cool names for this thing. You know, I really liked the gravy plane. I don't know who came up with that, but it was a good suggestion. Let's call it the gravy plane because it's kind of a play on the gravy train. I thought that was good. But, you know, these are the progressive conservatives. So it could have been Con Air. How about Air Ford One? Air Ford One. What about, okay, one more. What about Air Canada, Doug? Can we get behind any of these? It's a missed opportunity. Doug, you sucked all the show prep content that I had in my head right away when you said you were going to do the right thing and sell off this jet. I think we do need to continue this conversation at some point, but today is not the right day. It's still fresh, and there are a lot of people that are pissed right off about how this went down. So let it simmer for a little bit, and maybe we'll circle back on that. A couple of stories that I want to bring you a quick update on. There's been a lot of discussion about the back and forth happening lately between U.S. President Donald Trump and the Pope. The Pope spoke about this just yesterday, and he tried to clear the air a little bit.
There's been a certain narrative that has not been accurate in all of its aspects, but because of the political situation created when on the first day of the trip, the President of the United States made some comments about myself. Much of what has been written since then has been more commentary on commentary, trying to interpret what has been said. Just one little example, the talk that I gave at the prayer meeting for peace a couple days ago was prepared 2 weeks ago, well before the president ever commented on myself and on the message of peace that I am promoting. And yet, as it happens, it was looked at as if I was trying to debate again the president, which is not in my interest at all.
You know what? Good for the Pope. Good for the Pope. He's downplaying the tensions a little bit, not necessarily trying to walk it back, but I think it's better for everybody if the heat on that one dies off. The President of the United States taunting the Pope. I mean, that's a weird one that I admit I never saw coming. But since it happened, it's nice that the Pope is going to be the one to say, let's dial this back. Let's calm down with the rhetoric. The Pope wants peace. Donald Trump says he wants peace as well. If they want the same thing, then this should not be hard to figure out. And by the way, when you hear the Pope talk, sometimes it's easy to see him over there in Rome and forget that he's actually just from Chicago, but he's still got a little bit of that Chicago accent that comes through every now and again, and that's kind of cool.
Support for the show comes from Public, the investing platform for those who take it seriously. On Public, you can build a multi-asset portfolio of stocks, bonds, options, crypto, and now generated assets, which allow you to turn any idea into an investable index with AI. It all starts with your prompt. From renewable energy companies with high free cash flow to semiconductor suppliers growing revenue over 20% year over year, you can literally type any prompt and put the AI to work. It screens thousands of stocks, builds a one-of-a-kind index, and lets you backtest it against the S&P 500. Then you can invest in a few clicks. Generated assets are like ETFs with infinite possibilities, completely customizable and based on your thesis, not someone else's. Go to public.com/podcast and earn an uncapped 1% bonus when you transfer your portfolio. That's public.com/podcast. Paid for by Public Investing. Brokerage services by Open to the Public Investing Inc. Member FINRA and SIPC. Advisory services by Public Advisors LLC, SEC registered advisor. Generated assets is an interactive analysis tool. Output is for informational purposes only and is not an investment recommendation or advice. Complete disclosures available at public.com/disclosures.
Now I want to take you to Friday, White House briefing room. Fox News reporter Peter Doocy asking a question about something that a lot of people are starting to pick up on. You see, there are these scientists in America that have high-level security clearance and have been working on some very sensitive things. And since 2011, 11 of them have died under mysterious circumstances. And now people are starting to wonder, hey, what the hell is going on here?
There are now 10 American scientists who have either gone missing or died since mid-2024. They all reportedly had access to classified nuclear or aerospace material. Is anybody investigating this to see if these things are connected?
I've seen the report, Peter. I haven't spoken to our relevant agencies about it. I will certainly do that and we'll get you an answer.
What do you think is happening here, and do you think that this is connected or totally random?
Well, I hope it's random, but we're going to know in the next week and a half. I just left the meeting on that subject, so pretty serious stuff.
Okay, so now you've heard the press secretary and the president weigh in on this, and neither of them said much other than they're going to look into it. Trump's already looking into it. It's now 11 scientists that have gone missing or died. What's going on here? These would be ones that have some information about special propulsion systems, possibly alien technology. And now they're just dying under mysterious circumstances. It's up to 11 now. I don't have any commentary for you on that other than that's messed up. And I'd like to know what's going on. And I'm still waiting for the U.S. to completely declassify all of the UFO files. That should be coming in the next week or so, the initial drop of documents. And when that happens, wow, I think that we are owed some answers. Because for a very long time, they've insisted there's nothing out there. We're alone in the universe. It looks like they're about to drop information that confirms not only are we not alone in this universe, not only have we been visited, but we may also be in regular contact, and there may still be actual aliens walking the earth right now. Maybe. That's kind of where this is going. So I'm following it. And this case of the scientists that have disappeared or been killed, very, very strange stuff, but it kind of makes sense that it's connected, right? I mean, I think it's connected. You probably think it's connected. Chances are there's a connection, but we'll wait and see. Howard, trade negotiations going between Canada and the United States. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was doing some media over the last couple of days. Doesn't sound like things are going very well.
That is like the worst strategy I've ever heard. They suck. Look, we are a $30 trillion economy, right? We are the consumer of the world. Okay? Carney has a problem with us. He gets on a plane and he goes to China. Does he think the Chinese economy is going to buy his stuff? China is entirely an export-driven economy, right? So what did he do? He came back and said, oh, we'll take their electric cars.
Okay, a bit of mocking there. That's fine. How about a more in-depth response, though? That's what I'd like to hear. I'd like to know, how do things actually stand? Because you'll recall, the federal government, led by Mark Carney, said they were the best ones to get a deal done with America. And at one point, I thought we all agreed we do need to get a deal done with America, not the least of which is to renegotiate the USMCA. And Mark Carney is mused about uniting middle powers and trying to go around the U.S. economy. And I think we all understand, sure, that's good for diversifying our trade, but that's not a replacement for the U.S. market. We still need a deal done with America. You're going to hear the Prime Minister talk about that in just a sec. But first off, one more from Howard Lutnick.
Is President Trump committed to extending the USMCA ahead of the July deadline?
I think he thinks it's a bad deal, right? He thinks making Mexico and Canada be treated economically like Georgia and Alabama without them actually being committed.
Do you think it might lapse?
Is a bad trade deal.
I
think it needs to be reconsidered and reimagined correctly. There are parts of Mexico that are fundamental to us. There are parts of Canada, their energy and other things that are important to us. But the concept of taking an auto plant out of Ohio and Michigan and putting it in Mexico to break the union and to break our people is nuts. It was a bad industrial policy. It harmed America. President Trump is going to fix it. He's bringing it back. You're going to see it get brought back. And I think it needs to be reimagined and needs to be readdressed. There's plenty of good in it, but there's a huge amount of bad in it and needs to be reconsidered for the benefit of America.
The former top Canadian trade negotiator said the other day that time is on...
Christopher Friedland, who's the worst?
The Americans do not like Chrystia Freeland. I'll tell you what, I'm going to get to Mark Carney's weird video that he dropped yesterday. But before I do that, let's just hear a little bit in the name of balance from conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. What a weekend he had. He was in Winnipeg for the UFC fight. He got mobbed. The amount of people trying to get near Pierre for selfies, for autographs, just to shake his hand and say hello to him. It was incredible. Loud ovation. And then after the fight, he gets called up into the octagon for a big hug with the fighter. It was amazing. He was doing real well out there in Winnipeg. They seemed to really be happy that he was there at that UFC fight. Well, before he went, he did a speech to, I think it was the Canadian Club. Yeah, it was the Canadian Club in Toronto. And he talked a little bit about similar things to what he usually says on these speeches. This one specifically, though, on Canada-U.S. trade.
The only thing we're seeing here is an illusion. And the only thing real is the cost. Then there's the famous Davos speech about the need for a middle power alliance. While it had many crowd-pleasing lines in it, the rhetoric was short of details. What has it amounted to in reality? Middle powers. It's been a year. Mr. Carney has not negotiated a single new free trade agreement anywhere in the world in the last year. There have been dozens of unenforceable MOUs that say in the text they have no legal weight, but there has not been a single new trade agreement of any kind. The rhetoric simply doesn't match the results, and illusions are not reality. Lofty summit speeches, meaningless MOUs, symbolic signing ceremonies do not pay your mortgage, gas your tank, or fill your grocery cart here at home. They do not grow the economy, make us unbreakable abroad. So what is really going on here? How can Mark Carney talk such a big game abroad while doing so little to fix the real problems here at home? And why does it feel so much like it's all announcements and statements rather than results? At the most basic level, Mr. Carney is and always has been a big government liberal. He believes in the same top-down government-run economy that concentrates money and power in the hands of a small group of political authorities for the benefit of corporate insiders like him. The theory they have, it's trickle-down economics, is that a group of credentialed central planners can spend your money, take from one industry and give to another, and decide who gets what. It's the same liberal approach that doubled our debt and drove up the cost of living over the last decade. Nothing has changed. And the problem is that when politicians decide who gets what, those with the most power end up getting it all, and everyone else gets the bill. The well-lobbied for corporate insiders fill their pockets with tens of billions of dollars of projects that go over budget, over schedule, and often belly up. Governments block competitors from taking on political favorites, and they redirect resources from money-making businesses to money-losing businesses.
That's just a little bit of Pierre Poilievre's speech. If you want to see the whole thing, it is on CPAC and all over YouTube. A good speech, but very similar to many of the speeches that Pierre usually gives. Now, with that as a little bit of context, let's go to this video that the Prime Minister dropped yesterday. Prime Minister Carney, out of nowhere on a Sunday, decided he kind of wanted to address the nation. And one of the themes of this speech here is that we need to decrease our reliance on America. So what does he do? He goes to an American digital media giant to get his message out to Canadians. He put this out on YouTube, and I'm kind of shocked that the major TV networks aired it, as was no charge. I'm trying to figure out why they would do that and if they're going to offer equal time to the other parties, because that would be customary in this scenario. But I guess we'll wait and see if the media is going to be fair about this. Let's get to the Prime Minister speaking yesterday on social media.
I know from experience that outside forces can sometimes seem overwhelming. My previous jobs at the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England was part of my duties to make regular public reports on what we were doing to manage the economy. And I remember during the financial crisis, when there was a real risk of panic, I developed a practice called forward guidance. It was designed to assure people that however difficult the situation seemed on any given day, that we were acting, and importantly, that we would continue to act with overwhelming force against our problems until they were solved. And that's the spirit I'm talking to you about today. Security can't be achieved by ignoring the obvious or downplaying the very real threats that we Canadians face. I promise you, I will never sugarcoat our challenges. Instead, I will talk with you directly and regularly about our plan, why we're doing what we're doing, what's working, what isn't, and what we're going to do next. So here's the current situation. The world, as I said earlier, is more dangerous and divided. The U.S. has fundamentally changed its approach to trade, raising its tariffs to levels last seen during the Great Depression. Many of our former strengths, based on our close ties to America, have become our weaknesses that we must correct. Workers in our industries most affected by U.S. tariffs, in autos, in steel, in lumber, are under threat. Businesses are holding back investments, restrained by the pall of uncertainty that's hanging over all of us. The U.S. has changed, and we must respond. Canada Strong is our plan to build Canada by Canadians, for Canadians. It will attract new investment so we can build more for ourselves, striking new partnerships abroad so we can sell into new markets. It's about taking back control of our security, our borders, and our future. There are some who say there's no need for a comprehensive plan. They believe we should wait it out in the hope that the United States will return to normal, that the good old days will come back. But hope isn't a plan, and nostalgia is not a strategy. And the days that young Canadians have known all their lives haven't been that good. Their lifetimes have been marked by a series of shocks and crises from abroad: the Iraq War, the global financial crisis, COVID, and now this. We have to take care of ourselves because we can't rely on one foreign partner. We can't control the disruption coming from our neighbors. We can't bet our future on the hope that it will suddenly stop. But we can control what happens here. We can build a stronger country that can withstand disruptions from abroad, that creates good jobs here at home, that's a leader in this new world with a vast network of reliable allies.
The Prime Minister and his colleagues, I have a feeling, are about to mount an incredibly big anti-American rhetoric campaign. The Prime Minister assured us he was the guy to get a deal done with Trump. He missed 3 deadlines. No deal with Trump, no negotiations in the last 5 months. We are 2 months away from the USMCA, that is Kuzma, expiring. And now the Prime Minister's coming out to say, I'm the one who invented forward guidance. He didn't, by the way. Google it. He's saying he's going to come out and give us regular updates, but also, again, insisting we have to pivot away from the Americans. And why is the Prime Minister doing that? Because he can't get a deal done. Because he doesn't want to get a deal done. Because he's never wanted to get a deal done with the Americans. The Prime Minister is very, very, very beholden to China. He has allies in other left-led governments, and they want to form some sort of a pact to try and screw the Americans and create that one world government under China. But of course, we know the Americans are not going to accept that. They're not going to allow Chinese infiltration on their northern border. Now, I still think, and many, many, many people do, it's not an unpopular opinion. I still think that we need to get a deal done with the Americans. In fact, I see an opportunity for us to not just get a deal done with the Americans that covers free trade. I see an opportunity to get a comprehensive deal done with the Americans that could actually really benefit Canadians. Imagine this. We have great trade back and forth, the free flow of people back and forth, sharing of resources. And when I say that, I mean things like, hey, we've got lots and lots and lots of oil here in Canada that the Americans would certainly like to take advantage of. They've got lots and lots and lots of defense. And apparently everybody agrees China and Russia are coming for the Canadian Arctic. Even if we do get to a position where we're going to defend the Arctic on our own, it'll take decades to build up the military firepower to do that. You know, Mark Carney can say we can't rely on the Americans, but we are very much reliant on the Americans. And by the way, if the Russians or the Chinese decide they want to do some sort of incursion into the Arctic, even if they try and claim 1 square meter of the Arctic as their own, the Americans will be there because they've always been our closest friend and ally. And they want to get closer. This prime minister, though, doesn't want that. He's not interested. And that's part of the reason that he gave this speech.
That's the Canada Strong plan we're putting into action. Its goals are ambitious. To catalyze $1 trillion in investment, to create one Canadian economy out of 13, to build new trade and energy corridors, and to double the size of our clean energy capacity. Yes, that's ambitious. But in a crisis, fortune favors the bold. And there's comfort and confidence to be found in our country's history. After all, our ancestors built an improbable country in an inhospitable land where people were free to live their own lives. When I get into the office, I always look at this statue on my desk. It was given to me by Mike Myers just over a year ago. And this is General Isaac Brock. Brock was a hero who fought and gave his life for our forebears in the War of 1812. Before Canada even existed on paper, it had a shape in Brock's imagination. Faced with the threat of an American invasion, Brock built alliances across our land and inspired what would eventually become Canada. Others carried that effort forward. People like General de Salaberry, citizens like the...
Okay, I don't think anybody needs another history lesson here from Mark Carney, especially one about Sir Isaac Brock, who gave his life defending Canada. I really, really, really hope, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that this isn't what he was doing. But I really hope Prime Minister Carney is not trying to compare himself to Isaac Brock, who again gave his life for creating Canada, defending Canada. That's not what Mark Carney is doing. $1 trillion in investment. He said we need to be bold. Listen, he said the exact same thing a year ago. When we were having an election, he said all of these same things. Line for line, he said the exact same things. Catalyze $1 trillion of investment. Well, I have no doubt he's going to spend $1 trillion, probably more. But think of it this way. Whether that does or doesn't work doesn't really matter to Mark Carney. His companies, his network is greatly going to benefit from that $1 trillion. And if the whole country falls apart, oh well, he doesn't live here anyway. His whole family still lives in the States. His kids go to American schools. He's a British citizen or a European citizen. He said in the past he identifies as a European, not as a Canadian. It's crazy that we are just going to blindly follow this vision, which he laid out a year ago and hasn't done a thing on. We'd be having a different conversation right now if that prime minister had said, I'm going to sign right now. We are building a pipeline to the West Coast. And I'm going to sign tomorrow to build one up to Churchill into the Arctic. And then I'm going to sign another one that's going to cut right through Quebec, right through the Atlantic provinces, out to the East Coast. We're going to have 3 different pipelines that are going to pump oil in every which direction. And we are going to make Canada strong, because that would make Canada strong. The Prime Minister, again, talking about creating one economy instead of 13. There are still interprovincial trade barriers up. Still happening. Still happening. A year after he said he would fix this. Listen, feel however you want to feel about the Prime Minister, but one thing you cannot do, you cannot argue that he is taking action. You cannot argue that he is leading Canada somewhere into a great new direction, because there's zero evidence to support that. It's been a year. Nothing has been done. Things are getting worse in Canada. And that's all there is to it. That's just a fact. It's not to say he can't turn it around. It's not to say he won't have some sort of an epiphany, see some burning bush in Ottawa and say, you know what, I should just call Donald Trump and work this out. That might happen. But Canada doesn't turn around until Canada fixes it with America. These middle power alliances, these trade deals that he says he wants to do, great. But those aren't instead of a deal with America. That's in addition to a deal with America. And the deal with America has got to get done, and it's got to be the priority. Friends, there's a lot going on this week, and I will be talking about it all week right here on Scott Fox After 9. Thanks for your time. Enjoy your 420 celebrations. I hope you have a great one, and I'll catch you right back here in less than 24 hours.